She has been called a lot of things over the years. A survivor, a diva, an icon, Jenny from the block. But on this particular morning at Good Morning America, George Stephanopoulos decided to call her something else entirely. He decided to call her a failure. Not in those exact words, of course. George Stephanopoulos is too polished, too practiced in the art of the calculated question to be that obvious. But the intent was clear from the moment Jennifer Lopez sat down across from him in that familiar GMA studio, with its warm lighting and its carefully arranged coffee cups, and its illusion of friendly conversation. What she expected was a promotional interview about her Las Vegas residency, about her acclaimed performance in Kiss of the Spider-Woman, about her journey of rediscovery after her divorce. What she got was an ambush. What she got was George Stephanopoulos at his most dangerous. And what the audience got was the moment Jennifer Lopez finally decided she had taken enough. Subscribe and drop a comment below, because what you're about to witness will change how you see both of them forever. The Good Morning America studio felt different that Wednesday morning. Not the usual warmth of a promotional interview, not the easy rhythm of softball questions and practiced answers. There was something in the air that the producers sensed but couldn't quite name. Maybe it was George Stephanopoulos himself, who had been in a particular mood ever since the Trump settlement had forced him to apologize on national television, forced him to pay for words he still believed were true. Or maybe it was something about Jennifer Lopez, who had walked into the studio with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from surviving things that would have destroyed lesser people. At 56 years old, Jennifer Lopez had nothing left to prove. That was what she had told herself this morning as she prepared for another interview, another round of questions about her personal life, another opportunity for someone to reduce her decades of work to tabloid fodder. She had survived the Bronx. She had survived Hollywood. She had survived 4 marriages, including the most public divorce in recent memory. She had survived Oscar snubs that would have broken other actresses. And she was still here. Still performing sold-out shows at Caesar's Palace, still commanding attention, still, despite everything, standing. Her Las Vegas residency, up all night, had been a triumph. 12 shows at the Coliseum at Caesar's Palace, every single one sold out. Her twins, Max and Emmy, now 18 and heading to college, had appeared at her opening night. Critics had called it a return to form, a celebration of everything that made Jennifer Lopez a star. And Kiss of the Spider-Woman, despite being snubbed at both the Golden Globes and the Oscars, had earned her some of the best reviews of her career. Variety had written that she steals the show, that she was stunning, beguiling, confident, and thrilling. But none of that seemed to matter to certain people. None of that seemed to matter to George Stephanopoulos. George Stephanopoulos rose to greet her as she entered the interview space. That section of the GMA studio set up for one-on-one conversations, just the two of them at a small table, cameras positioned to capture every micro-expression, every flicker of discomfort. He smiled, but it was the smile of a prosecutor about to begin cross-examination. "Jennifer, thank you so much for being here," George said, his voice carrying that practiced warmth that had served him well through decades of political interviewing. "You've had quite a year." "Thank you for having me, George." Jennifer settled into her chair with the ease of someone who had done thousands of interviews. "It's been a journey for sure. Let's start with the good news. Your Las Vegas residency, up all night, has been a phenomenon. Sold-out shows, incredible reviews. How does it feel to be back on stage after everything you've been through?" Jennifer's face softened. This was the interview she had prepared for. "It feels like coming home, honestly. I took a year off after everything. Canceled tours, stepped away from work, focused on my kids, on myself. And coming back to the stage, being in that room with the audience, feeling that energy, it reminded me why I started doing this in the first place." "Speaking of taking time off," George said, and there was a shift in his tone that Jennifer caught immediately. "You mentioned your divorce from Ben Affleck, your 4th marriage that ended in divorce. At what point do you start to wonder if maybe the problem isn't the marriages themselves?" The question landed like a slap. Jennifer's smile didn't waver, but something changed behind her eyes. "I'm not sure what you're asking, George. I'm asking whether you've done any reflection on why none of your marriages have worked out. 4 attempts, 4 failures. That's a pattern, isn't it? The studio felt smaller suddenly. The camera operators shifted uncomfortably. A producer somewhere behind the scenes was probably already reaching for a phone. I wouldn't call them failures, Jennifer said carefully. I would call them chapters. Some chapters end differently than we hope, but that doesn't mean they weren't worth living. But isn't that just a way of avoiding accountability? You've built this narrative around reinvention, around always bouncing back. But at some point, don't you have to acknowledge that the common denominator in all these failed relationships is you? Jennifer's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. George, I came here to talk about my work, about my residency, about the next phase of my career. I'm not sure why we're diving into my personal life like this. Because your personal life is part of your brand, isn't it? George leaned forward slightly, that prosecutorial instinct fully engaged now. The Jennifer reunion was everywhere. The wedding was everywhere. The divorce was everywhere. You can't use your personal life for publicity when it's going well, and then claim it's off limits when it falls apart. I never used my personal life for publicity. Really? The Netflix documentary? The halftime special? The social media posts? None of that was using your personal life to promote your career? Jennifer's hands, which had been resting calmly on the table, moved to her lap. Those were attempts to share my story authentically. There's a difference between sharing and exploiting. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've made a career out of curating a certain image, selling a certain narrative, and then playing the victim when people question it. The word victim hung in the air like an accusation. Jennifer Lopez had been called many things in her career, but she had never been called weak. She had never allowed anyone to suggest that she was anything other than a fighter. I'm not playing anything, George. Her voice was harder now, the warmth gone. I've built a 30-year career through talent and hard work. I've survived things that would have ended other people's careers multiple times over. And I'm not going to sit here and let you reduce all of that to some tabloid narrative about my marriages. George smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who believed they were winning. Let's talk about your career then. Kiss of the Spider-Woman, great reviews at Sundance, real Oscar buzz, and then nothing. Another snub. Just like Hustlers, just like Selena. At what point do you accept that the Academy simply doesn't see you as a serious actress? The question was designed to wound, and it did. Jennifer had been open about how much the Hustlers snub had hurt her, how she had genuinely believed she was going to be nominated, how the rejection had stung more than she wanted to admit. And now here was George Stephanopoulos, picking at that wound on national television. The Academy makes their decisions, Jennifer said, her voice controlled. I don't control what they choose to recognize. All I can do is the work. But isn't that a convenient way of avoiding the question? You've been doing this for 30 years. You've never been nominated for an Oscar. You've never won a Grammy. You've never won a Golden Globe. At some point, doesn't the lack of industry recognition tell you something about how your peers view your work? Jennifer's eyes flashed dangerously. My peers? You want to talk about how my peers view my work? I've worked with Steven Soderbergh, Barry Sonnenfeld, Oliver Stone. I've been directed by Bill Condon. I've shared the screen with George Clooney, Diego Luna, Cate Blanchett. None of them seem to have a problem with my work. And yet the awards haven't followed. Awards aren't everything, George. That's what people who don't win awards always say. The cruelty of the comment was breathtaking in its casualness. Jennifer stared at George for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was quiet, but carried an edge that cut through the studio's artificial warmth. What is this really about, George? I'm asking the questions that need to be asked. No, you're not. You're attacking me. There's a difference. A journalist asks questions to illuminate truth. You're asking questions to inflict damage. And I'm trying to figure out why. George's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. I'm not attacking you. I'm holding you accountable. Accountable for getting divorced? For not winning an Oscar? For being 56 years old and still working in an industry that discards women half my age? Jennifer leaned forward now, her own prosecutorial instincts emerging. Or is this about something else entirely? Is this about you needing to prove that you're still a tough journalist after what happened with Trump? The mention of Trump landed like a bomb. George's face tightened, and for the first time in the interview, he looked genuinely thrown off balance. This has nothing to do with that, doesn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a man who was publicly humiliated, who was forced to apologize, who had to pay millions of dollars and delete his social media in shame, is now taking out his frustration on an easy target. Someone who can't sue you. Someone who can't make ABC pay $15 million for your mistakes. George's voice hardened. That's completely out of line. Is it? You've spent the last 10 minutes questioning my marriages, my career, my worth as an actress, my relevance as an artist. And you want to tell me what's out of line? Jennifer's voice was rising now, passion replacing the controlled calm she had maintained until now. I've been doing interviews for 30 years, George. I know the difference between tough questions and cheap shots. And everything you've asked me this morning has been a cheap shot. I'm asking legitimate questions about your public persona and career. No, you're trying to tear me down because tearing people down is what you do now. It's what this industry has become. It's not enough to report the news anymore. You have to create drama, manufacture conflict, turn every interview into a confrontation. George tried to regain control. Jennifer, I think you're being overly sensitive about perfectly reasonable questions regarding your very public life and career. Overly sensitive? Jennifer laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's what men always say when women push back. We're sensitive. We're emotional. We can't handle scrutiny. Meanwhile, you're sitting there nursing a bruised ego from a settlement that happened 4 months ago, and I'm supposed to pretend I don't notice? My professional matters have nothing to do with this interview. Your professional matters have everything to do with this interview, George. Because a confident journalist, a secure journalist, doesn't need to attack their guests to feel powerful. But a journalist who's been publicly humiliated, who's been called out as careless, who had to apologize for his own words, that journalist might need to prove something. And I'm not going to be the punching bag you use to make yourself feel better. The studio was completely silent now. Somewhere behind the cameras, producers were frantically texting each other, trying to decide whether to cut to commercial, whether to intervene, whether to let this historic confrontation play out. George's face had gone red, but his voice remained controlled. I think you're deflecting from the substance of my questions by making personal attacks. Personal attacks? Up from her chair, and the camera operators scrambled to adjust their shots. You questioned my character, my marriages, my talent, my relevance, my worth as an artist. You suggested I'm a failure because I haven't won awards. You implied I'm the problem in all my relationships. And now you're accusing me of making personal attacks? She looked directly into the camera, addressing the audience at home. Let me tell you something about George Stephanopoulos. This is a man who spent 15 years in Democratic politics before becoming a journalist. A man who was forced to apologize to Donald Trump on national television for being sloppy with his words. A man whose network paid $15 million because he couldn't tell the difference between what a jury actually found and what he wanted them to have found. George stood up as well, his professional composure finally cracking. That's enough. No, George, it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. Jennifer's voice was strong, clear, and absolutely unwavering. You want to talk about failures? Let's talk about a journalist who can't get basic facts right. Let's talk about a network that's so afraid of political pressure that they'll throw their own anchor under the bus. Let's talk about a man who deleted his entire social media presence because he couldn't handle the criticism. I deleted my account because the platform has become toxic. You deleted your account because you were embarrassed, because people were calling you out, because for the first time in your career you couldn't control the narrative. Jennifer stepped away from the table, but she wasn't done. You know what the difference is between you and me, George? When I fail, I own it. When my marriages end, I'm honest about it. When I don't win awards, I keep working. But you? You hide. You deflect. You attack other people to make yourself feel better. George's voice was shaking now, whether from anger or something else. You're making a spectacle of yourself. No, George, I'm defending myself. There's a difference, something you should understand, given how badly you failed to defend yourself when it actually mattered. She gathered her things with deliberate precision, her movements controlled and graceful, even in the midst of her fury. I've been in this industry for 30 years. I've been underestimated, disrespected, dismissed, and doubted more times than I can count. But I'm still here, still performing to sold-out crowds, still making movies that people want to see. Still, at 56 years old, doing things that women half my age can't do. She looked at George one final time, and her voice dropped to something quieter but somehow more devastating. You asked me why my marriage has failed. Here's my answer. Because I'd rather be alone than be with someone who doesn't see my worth. And you asked me why I haven't won an Oscar. Here's my answer. Because the same industry that celebrates mediocre men has always held women like me to an impossible standard. But you know what, George? I don't need a statue to know my value. I don't need your approval or the Academy's or anyone else's. She paused at the edge of the set, turning back one final time. But you? You need approval so badly that you've become everything you once criticized. A politician disguised as a journalist. A bully disguised as an interviewer. A wounded man taking out his pain on people who have done nothing to deserve it. With that, Jennifer Lopez walked off the set of Good Morning America, her heels clicking against the floor in the stunned silence that followed. The cameras kept rolling, capturing George Stephanopoulos standing alone at the table, his face a mixture of anger and something that looked almost like shame. What had started as a routine promotional interview had become something much more significant. A reckoning. A woman who had spent decades being picked apart finally picking back. In the hours and days that followed, the interview would dominate social media. Jennifer Lopez destroys George Stephanopoulos would trend for 3 days straight. Her words about his Trump settlement, about his deleted social media, about the difference between defending yourself and attacking others, would be quoted and re-quoted across every platform. Media critics would write think pieces about the state of celebrity journalism, about the line between tough questioning and harassment, about what happens when interviewers forget that their job is to illuminate rather than destroy. Robin Roberts, George's own co-anchor at Good Morning America, would be notably silent on social media for 3 days before posting a simple message. Every woman deserves to be treated with respect. In every interview, in every room, always. Diego Luna, her Kiss of the Spider-Woman co-star, would post simply, "This is the woman I had the honor of working with. Fearless, unapologetic, exactly who she has always been. The Academy may not have recognized her performance, but everyone who saw the film knows the truth." Shakira would add, "Sisters who have survived this industry together know the truth. We don't break. We don't bow. We don't apologize for existing. Love you, Jay. You said everything millions of women wish they could say." Bill Condon, director of Kiss of the Spider-Woman, would release a statement. "I have directed many talented actresses in my career. Jennifer Lopez is among the finest I have ever worked with. Her performance in our film is extraordinary, and no interview, no snub, no dismissive question can change that reality." Mark Anthony, father of her twins, would post a rare public comment. "The mother of my children is one of the strongest people I know. Always has been. Always will be." Ben Affleck, surprisingly, would release a statement through his publicist. "Jennifer Lopez is one of the most talented, hard-working people I have ever known. Anyone who questions her worth as an artist or a human being is revealing their own limitations, not hers. I am proud of everything she has accomplished and continues to accomplish." The response from other journalists was mixed but telling. Many defended George's right to ask tough questions, but even some of his supporters acknowledged that the interview had crossed from tough into cruel. "There's a difference between holding someone accountable and trying to break them down," wrote one media critic. George Stephanopoulos seemed to forget that difference, and Jennifer herself would return to the stage at Caesar's Palace that very night, opening her show with a speech that would be replayed millions of times. "Today, someone tried to make me feel small. Someone tried to reduce 30 years of work, 30 years of dreams, 30 years of fighting and falling and getting back up to a series of failures. But I'm still standing here. And I will always be standing here. Because that's what women like me do. We survive. We rise. We refuse to be defined by anyone else's limitations. The audience gave her a 5-minute standing ovation before she sang a single note. George Stephanopoulos would return to Good Morning America the next day without addressing what had happened. ABC would issue a statement calling the interview a candid conversation that took an unexpected turn, but the damage was done. In trying to rebuild his credibility by tearing someone else down, he had only revealed how much he had truly lost. And Jennifer Lopez, the girl from the Bronx who had been counted out more times than anyone could remember, had proven once again that she was not to be underestimated. What do you think about this explosive confrontation? Was George Stephanopoulos out of line, or was he just doing his job? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories that will leave you absolutely speechless.